Hi, I'm Yegi. I'm an entrepreneur and success coach who wants it all: family, luxury, career, and the freedom to do whatever I want whenever I want. And I'll do whatever it takes to get there. I created the Yegi project to document my journey and inspire others to do the same. My mission is to change the world by influencing and leading others to do what they love and live fulfilled lives. Hello. Welcome back to the Yegi Project. Today we have Corrie Lo, who helps women in the workforce become confident leaders and entrepreneurs by identifying and addressing their overwhelmed culprit. She has been featured in major media outlets such as TEDx, Girl Boss, Business Insider, and more. She not only has been the fourth generation entrepreneur in her family, but she also has 15 years of senior vice president experience. However, life had other plans for her. So after following a series of traumatic events, she decided to step down from her role and take on her journey in her keynote speaking, workshops, and coaching programs. So please, Corrie, please tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
You got it. So my story actually starts out with a really expensive piece of paper that said I could draw well. So I graduated with a fine arts degree and had absolutely no idea what to do, in terms of a career or making money. So I was waiting tables. Very cliche, I know. And this really upset my father at the time, who helped bankroll said expensive piece of paper. And at the time, he was the second generation running that family business in particular. And he said, you know what, why don't you come work for the family business, see how you like it. You can start as a graphic designer, and at least then you have some consistent income coming in, not like you're waiting tables. No shade to waiting tables.
And it's still similar to art, graphic design is close to art.
Right. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, good deal. So I take the job and basically blink, and it's 15 years later, and I'm running it as senior vice president. Never anticipated in a million years that would be where I was. But truth was, I loved it. Entrepreneurship was in my blood. So it really I took very easily to learning, about business and creating relationships and that kind of thing. And because of my creative background, it made me a really great marketer. So that was kind of where I eventually, by the time I concluded, my career there, I was working as a senior vice president. I was overseeing everything from sales, marketing, operations, the whole shebang. But my sweet spot was really in helping small mom and pop shops compete with Fortune 200s. Right. So really trying to get creative. How exactly do you get, somebody with no budget to compete that way? And I loved what I did. I loved that I was working with my family. It was a very important value of mine. But something felt off, and I kind of never really pinpointed it. And that's when things started to get really difficult for me. I went through a phase. The whole thing lasted about 5 years, but it started off with me basically realizing that I was in an abusive relationship after my son arrived. My son was 5 months old, and I ended up leaving that relationship very suddenly, took him with me to work one day and never went back.
Wow, good for you. That takes a lot of strength. So congratulations on doing that.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And, I went from being at the top of my game, brand new mom, had everything I was looking for on paper. And then that evening I was homeless, like with a baby, showing up on my parents' doorstep going like, where do I go from here? So the years that followed after that became very, very difficult, especially being the only woman working in my industry and leadership, trying to get the flexibility and stuff that I needed to be able to be a present mom for my son. I was commuting over 20 hours a week, and that was on top of my 50 to 60 hours a week I was working.
Wow.
Most I ever got to see him was literally through my home security camera systems when I would check during my lunch break and watch him playing with my au pair. So it was really heartbreaking, really devastating, but still I never made a change. Right? I was just kind of like, everybody has to do this.
Yeah, you were
in
the
who am I to be
loop of
different?
things, and that's what we're told, you got to work hard.
Work hard, play hard, do what you got to do. You can have it all, they tell us
Yeah.
working women. And what really changed things for me was when I had finally bought a new home. I was dating again. I had made huge strides in my career. And I'd been in a long-term relationship with somebody who was going to be my life partner. Our kids were best friends. We were in the process of moving in together, getting engaged. And I was the one to discover he took his life by suicide.
Oh my God.
So that moment really kind of, the one thing that really stands apart for me when I think back and remember that day is number one, I was very kind of calm about the situation despite how traumatic it was. Because part of me knew, okay, in the like 3 years leading up to this, I already went to hell and back, and
Wow.
I know I'll be able to do it again, right? So I've started from zero before, I could do it again. That's not the
Well,
problem.
that's the confidence aspect of it. So, before we go on with your story, I would
Okay.
really like to ask your insight on the confidence factor because you do also
Sure.
talk about that. So, how does somebody build the confidence to even address something painful like that?
Well, part of it, I believe, is really relying on your intuition. I think so many women in particular, we allow our brains and our ego to get in the way instead of actually going on what our gut feelings are.
I see.
Right. So for me, when it came to, and I talk about this a lot in my keynotes, there are two ways to become motivated to make a major change. The first one is, trusting your intuition, making, logical decisions. For me in that moment when I had something thrown at me that day, I was like, you know what? I take my baby with me to work. Like that was a very rational decision in that moment. The other harder way is through the pivotal life moments. So like my suicide loss, or if you lose a job, or the pandemic. That's a situation where no matter what, life is going to be very different after the event than before it. That's like a forced way to kind of build that confidence because like I don't really have a choice,
Yeah.
right? I got to kind of like build my way up. But other than that, it's really kind of trusting on your intuition
Okay. Awesome. All
for
right.
sure.
So, please continue to tell us your story after.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So speaking to that confidence, at that point, that moment really made me think, like, hey, Corey, you and everything can be gone in an instant. Stop missing out on your life. Like, what are you doing? So at that point, I decided I was going to kind of use the same framework that I did to pull myself out of the divorce and have such fast results after the suicide loss and see what happens. So one of the very first changes I made was I stepped down from my long-term role to try to create a more inclusive work environment for me to be able to have flexibility to be with my kid. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I was going to be like a coach or a speaker, but I was going to figure it out. But the crazy part is when I did decide to do that and make all the changes and go through my process, within weeks of starting my business, I landed my first paying clients. Within a couple of months of sharing my story online and marketing myself, because I was a veteran marketer, having done it for 20 years, I built an audience of close to 30,000 people online. And within a year, I shared how I did it on TEDx.
Wow.
And ever since then, I've been speaking on how exactly do you transform really overwhelming scenarios. It resonates a lot for working moms right now. How exactly do you transform that into action and do so in a manner that you protect yourself from burnout and stress and all these other things so you can continue to be a high performer?
So, what are the top three things that somebody can do if they are in that overwhelm factor right now to take action? What are three simple, clear actions they can take?
Sure, I'll actually give you five.
Okay. Better.
Because that ties directly into the framework that I talk and speak on. So I came up with this framework. It's called the overwhelm culprits. And basically, if you're able to identify what a root cause of your overwhelm is, it allows you to know what you need to do to then take action, right? It kind of gives you that first step. And they're all really easy to remember. They all begin with a C, and they're lack of any one of these things. So the first one is a lack of clarity.
Okay.
So it's not so much knowing what it is you want, you really need to know why you want it. So for me, as an example, this is where I had gone wrong when it came to my commute, when I was still all like depressed and things were still feeling off and I was the new mom and I was still juggling everything. I didn't make a change until I experienced the suicide loss. And the reason why is because I wasn't clear on why it was I was doing the work I was doing. And when I kind of got clear and understood after the suicide loss, hey, I'm doing this because I want to spend time with people I love.
I
And then I
see.
realized by spending time at this job and in the car, I'm not spending time with my son, who's the most important person on earth for me. When that clicked, then all of a sudden I was like, okay, let's go, game time, quit the
Yeah.
job, like change all the
You
things.
clarified why you're doing it, so it was easier to make the changes.
Exactly. Then the second one ties into what you had asked me about earlier, which is confidence, right? So a lack of confidence. It doesn't matter if you know what you want and why you want it. If you don't believe you can do it, that's another challenge in itself. So if you lack confidence, unfortunately, confidence is an inside job. You're the only one who could take care of that. You can't get that from other people.
Yeah, we need to work on it. And there is, I believe like that's the number one thing we need to work on is our confidence. And there's many different ways we can work on it. It's very ideal if we build it through childhood, but most of the time, many of us don't. We have to work on it as adults, and there's different ways. So what advice would you give to our listeners if somebody feels like, okay, I recognize what I need to change, I know I'm clear on what I want, but I'm afraid, right? I don't know if I could do it. Like,
Fear of
what's
failure.
going to happen if I step down? Because you stepped down and you hoped for the best, but you had the confidence that everything was going to be okay. Now, what
Sure.
advice would you give to our listeners who are like, okay, I get it. Like, this is a change I want to make, but how am I going to pay my bills, for example?
Sure. Well, one way I would think is to reframe it. And granted, I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur, right? So it's easy for me to say something like this, but I think the mindset is really helpful for anybody, regardless of whether or not you've ever wanted to have a business. And when you think about it, every entrepreneur that's successful, they are literally professional failures. They have failed so many times, time in, again and again and again, by taking action, trying new things, seeing what worked, and then finally something sticks and it's like, whoa, it's raining money.
Yeah.
But they're professional failures. So you really have to have that kind of experimental mindset. And I think probably the biggest thing when it comes to confidence is really taking your ego out of it. You're taking action on it. The fact that you fail at it, it's not a reflection of your self-worth. It just means simply the data didn't line up. It just didn't do what you expected it to do.
So don't
what
take
can
it
you change or
personally,
tweak?
yeah.
Don't take it personally. It's what kind of within your results held you up, and what can you do to address that to have a different result the next time you do it, right? But if you just give up and stop, then ultimately that's more of a failure, because then you're preventing yourself from really achieving your fullest potential.
Excellent. All right.
Right.
So, how about number 3? So we talked about it, right?
Number 3.
Yes.
Yep. So we've got, we talked about lack of clarity, lack of confidence. The next one is lack of community.
Okay.
Right. So the famous motivational speaker, Jim Rohn, once said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yep.
And this is so true. So if the people that you choose to surround yourself with, because let's be real, we curate the people in our life, right? We can walk away at any time. We allow them in. So if the people you surround yourself with either don't know how to do what it is that you want to do, don't believe it's possible, or feel in some way, shape, or form it's not going to benefit them, so they're going to hold you back, then it's no wonder why you're stuck, overwhelmed, and not making any progress, right? So it's really up to you to curate your support circle with people who have known and experienced either what it is you're going through. So for me, I had gone to different divorce support groups. I had a single mom community that I had built within my local neighborhood, or going to suicide loss survivor groups. Right now I want to become an author. I'm taking my keynote and I'm turning it into a book. So I signed up to work with an author mentor, right? Somebody who's done it, who knows the ropes, that can give me the right steps. So mentors are a great way to do this. But really having the right people surrounding you is crucial.
So let's, I'm sorry, I'm going to pause you there when that's
Okay.
up. So let's kind of break down that aspect of it. So really it's networking, right? Networking with the right groups, right people that will suit your life and your purpose or whatever goal you're trying to achieve. Now you've done it through support groups and you said mentorship. What advice would you give people on networking? Because in today's world, a lot of young entrepreneurs also, or a lot of people, even if they've had experience, it's hard for them to just do like cold networking, right? Unless somebody introduces them. So where can they start to build and form a better community around them for them to get closer to their goals?
Sure. So I love networking. I could talk about this all day long. But with that said, and by the way, too, I also want to preface this by saying I am an ambivert. So while I'm a speaker and I do well in large groups of people, I can only do it in small amounts. Just because you feel introverted doesn't mean that you can't take advantage of networking. There's so many different ways that you could go about doing that. So just wanted to kind of throw that disclaimer out there. First, in order to be an effective networker, you need to be really clear on what your goals are through your networking, right? And that really kind of doubles back to the clarity that we're talking about. So why exactly are you doing it? So are you doing it because you want to get a new job? Are you doing it because you just went through a trauma, and you're looking to find other people who have experienced it? Are you looking to achieve something new in your career, like I am, becoming an author, right? So having clear goals, and what it is you're trying to accomplish through your networking is the most important thing, because I know so many people who get into networking and they're just kind of adding people and it's not quality.
Yeah.
Right? Where you really, it's the sum of the quality connections you have, not the sum of your total connections.
Of course.
So once you're really clear on that, there's two different ways that you can make the most of your connections. And the way I usually describe it to my clients is you want to get clear on who like the specific person is you're looking for, and as well as who are the most likely people who know the exact person you're looking for. Right. So in business and entrepreneurship, we call this your ICA, or ideal client avatar. There's a few different, ways you could do it. But even if you're trying to get a job, or trying to network personally, it still applies. If you don't know specifically who it is you're looking to get connected with, it's going to be so much harder when you meet people who aren't that person to know exactly who they can connect you with, right through their network.
Can you give us your example of becoming an author, right? So finding your mentor as an author, where do you start first? I think an example would help our listeners.
Sure. So, I mean, for me, and this actually kind of worked out easy for me because I ended up working with a mentor that I've worked with in the past. When I had first started my business, she was a coach, author, speaker. So I trusted her. So I knew coming back with this, and she's very well regarded, as an author. That's her primary thing. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to come back to her. But when I was shopping for authors, because I researched, not just her, but other ones, I really kind of looked at, okay, well, number one, what type of book am I trying to write? I'm trying to write, my book is going to be more of a hybrid self-help / memoir.
Okay.
So which is kind of a unique kind of book. So I was looking at, okay, well, who are author coaches that support this type of, book? Number one, because some of them, they only do memoir. Some of them do, business, like what's your niche, right? So I had to be specific on that. I wanted to be specific on the types of publishers that they've worked with. How long have they been in the business for? Where were my gaps in the system? So for me, I had taken some online courses in the past, but I was having trouble, even though I have a proposal done, it wasn't landing. I was pitching, it wasn't landing. So I'm like, I need somebody who's going to be able to come in and just help me really hone in on that proposal part, and looking at seeing like who does, specifically proposal overhauls, like what do their packages look like? So the more clarity you have on what it is you need help with.
That's what it sounds
right?
like. It sounds like it all goes back to that step one, is the clarity. Is
Yep.
How clear are you of what you want in whatever project you're trying to accomplish?
And that's why the overwhelm culprit system works so great, because if you get stuck on something, even if your culprit is community, for example, that you're looking for a mentor and you're still stuck on it, even though you know you need the mentor, then it circles back to clarity.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So you always have some place to go to help you get to that next step.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing that again. All right, so step 4. What's our
Step
fourth
4.
one?
So the next one is a lack of conditioning. So when I talk about conditioning, I'm talking about your physical and your mental health and wellness.
Ooh, so
right?
important.
And for a lot of working women, especially working mothers, this is the first thing that goes out the window. You're just, because we're so used to saying yes to everybody else and no to ourselves, and we don't make any time to take care of ourselves. And this is why there's such like an epidemic right now of working moms burning out.
Yeah.
Because we don't physically take care of ourselves. So the number one thing that you got to be doing is, how's your sleep hygiene? Are you eating well? Are you moving your body? Some kind of movement. Doesn't have to necessarily be exercise. If you're walking 20 minutes a day, that's great, right? But what exactly are you doing for your mental health? Is a great example. Some folks like to meditate. Some people need journaling time. It's different and unique to each individual person, but that really needs to kind of be built into your overall lifestyle in order to sustain you so that you don't burn out.
Yeah.
Right. So lack of conditioning. And then the last and final C is a lack of consistency. right? So that comes back to that fear of failure we were talking about.
Oh yeah, that's the hard part. I think that's the
Yeah.
part where people end up giving up. A lot of all the other steps are pretty clear, and I guess high motivated people can really like figure all the other steps out. But this last one, the consistency, and there's a saying, consistency is key. But
Yep.
really, how do we stay consistent?
Yeah. And there's so many different ways to go about it too, because you're right. Some people, especially the high performers, it's like consistency is easy. They just kind of keep at it. For other folks, building in that personal accountability. You got to figure out what personally motivates you, what's going to make you actually follow through with things. But I find the simplest solution is to like set yourself accountability appointments. Like I personally do them. I have a daily one, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then annually. Right, where I kind of sit down and it's an hour or two out of my day and I go through, well, not daily, my daily one's like 10 minutes, but that said, it's like, that's a standing appointment where every day I look at, okay, like what has gone well for me? Like what actions have I taken that's working? What's not working? What can I do differently in the next time frame?
I love
Right.
that.
So that
I do that too.
and that allows you to kind of keep up that consistency as well as adapt to pivots. Right? Because if you're analyzing stuff on a regular basis like that and have that standing appointment, it makes it easier. If something pops up that is not working, you're like, okay, I have the full picture of everything that's going on. This is what I need to change so that I stay on track.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a necessity. Like I think if you're an entrepreneur and you have nobody else who is your boss, basically, or telling you what to do, that process is a necessity, or else you will like fail. There's nobody else holding you accountable. So you need to have a system that works for yourself. And I love the system you shared. So you said daily, monthly, quarterly, and annually?
Annually are my favorite.
Your favorite. Awesome. All right. I think that covers our 5, right? Our 5
Yeah.
C's.
Yeah, and it's a lot of stuff that you could do and take action on right there alone.
Yes. So my next question, because I'm curious, I don't think I've mastered this quite far. I listen to my intuition a lot, and I think I have a good connection with it. But the analysis paralysis. So can you tell us what that even means? Like, what is that, and how do you attack it?
Sure. So analysis paralysis, in my experience of working with my clients, that's really perfectionism in disguise.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
No, it's true. It's like it's you're analyzing all of the different options to death because you're number one afraid of moving forward or selecting the wrong one, but also you're afraid that it's not going to be the perfect one, or you might choose the wrong one and therefore quote unquote fail. That you're going to analyze them all to death to avoid having to do that and potentially failing.
Yeah, so it's a psychological thing almost. So what advice would you give to someone who is experiencing that? So if I recognize I am like beating this one thing way out of proportion, how do I kind of just make a decision and move on? How do I practice doing that?
And this is something too, even for those who are really, really good at taking action, even myself, I find myself procrastinating on stuff, analysis paralysis. It's really getting clear on why are you afraid to move forward? First and foremost, there's usually some kind of a fear there. And when you're able to unpack it and address it, usually it's a mindset shift that you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that I was carrying that.
And there's that clarity again.
And it makes it easier to kind of move forward. But yeah, I would say that's probably the easiest way. I think to go through it by like trying to think, okay, well, why am I not?
Really thinking about
why am I not taking it?
Yeah, the root cause of it and not what you're doing. And I've done that in practice, and there's always a root cause. Sometimes I have to sleep on it. Sometimes I have to journal or kind of ask my close people who know me well, but there's always a root cause. You're right.
So true. And then the other thing I think that's important too is to remember done is better than perfect. And done is better than perfect also ties into that taking action even if you're afraid.
Yeah.
Right. And the more that you do that and the more that things aren't perfect and you see that things don't break,
and it's gonna
the more confidence you're going to have.
Definitely. And I went through that personal experience. I can second that. It totally works that way. And you've been in entrepreneurship for a long time. So to you, it might come natural, but I still, I have been too about 12 years now, but it does kind of work that way. The first time it's so hard to just say, oh, it's okay. It's fine. It's, I just have a deadline, right? The way I used to attack it is I would just give myself a deadline and I would literally count, like put a 5-second timer and be like, okay, I'm and make a decision within this
Yep.
5 seconds. It's either yay or nay, or like pick whichever one you want, and that's it. No going back.
Right. No, I love that. That's so true. And I think too, it doesn't really matter what stage of business you're in. I mean, we've been talking a lot through the course of this conversation using my journey to being an author as an example. But even as recently as a couple of months ago, I sent my first proposal to a book agent and I like wanted to puke. Like I had to work through that sensation of this really makes me like want to vomit right now. Like what is going on here, and having to unpack why I had those feelings. And ultimately it was just an unrealistic fear. Like it made absolutely no sense, but I had to just push through it. And once I hit send, I was like, oh, okay, I'm still here. It's fine. And the feeling subsides. So it's okay if it happens.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like that that nervous feeling is also excitement. If we recognize it, it's probably something we
Yes.
really want, and we just need to push through that fear, which is actually excitement. So just go.
Yep, exactly. I love that.
So one question I know you address is how do you find the purpose in your pain? I feel like sometimes it's easy looking backwards. So life, I believe that when we go through certain things in life, it is leading us to where we need to be. I am 100% believe in that. So I surrender a lot of the times now when I'm in a painful situation or a situation that is not ideal at first. But for someone who can't recognize, it's like, okay, why is this happening to me? This horrible thing, why is it happening to me? How would you advise someone to address that, or how to get past it to find a purpose in that pain?
Sure. And I mean, that resonates for me. I mean, I went through 5 years of my life where I was like, why again? Like, why me? This stuff just keeps happening over and over again. A few different things when it comes to that. First, I am a true believer that each and every one of us were put on this earth to help and serve other people in some capacity, right? I really believe that's like why humans exist. And every single thing that you experience, good, bad, and indifferent, prepares you for how you're supposed to help and serve other people next, right? And it's through what we learn in those experiences. So for me, when I was in the day-to-day of that, like, oh, why me over and over again, I really doubled down and tried to focus on what's the lesson here? What do I need to learn? And truth is, there were some patterns, around whether it be with the abusive behaviors I accepted, had to tie directly into my confidence that I had to, speak to. Later on, there were decisions I was making, certain types of people I kept allowing into my life that needed to be taken out, which again comes down to that curation thing that we were talking about. So it's like, what exactly do I need to learn through this scenario and take with me in the future? And then once I figure it out, then from there, how do I pay it forward by helping other people, not that they have to suffer the same way I did?
I see. Yeah, definitely taking the time to recognize it and to spend time with yourself. Awesome. So the one other topic I want to talk about, because I know a lot of people face it, and I know that we can face it at different points in our life, is imposter syndrome. So that is such a cliche topic, I feel like nowadays too. A lot of us, especially high achievers, we want to get to our next level or do our next thing, right? We feel like we're ready. But then when we get started, we feel like imposters. Like, what makes me have the confidence that I'm the right person to be doing this, right? So can you speak a little bit about that and how we can recognize that is just imposter syndrome and what we can do to get past it?
Sure. The first thing is a mindset reframe, and that imposter syndrome isn't necessarily a bad thing. Imposter syndrome is your sign that you've hit the next level.
Oh, I see. I never looked at it that way.
Yeah, so it's when you finally find yourself in a scenario, and it happens to me all the time too. It's like when I first became a speaker, I'm like, who am I to be up here like talking and running my mouth and whatever else? Like, what do people have to learn from me? But it was because it was such like a new experience for me that, watching other people around me doing it professionally, I was like, I'm just out of my element. But then after you're there for a while and you really kind of step into it, like, okay, no, this is, the next level. This is what's next for me. No different than me wanting to vomit when I send on the book proposal, right? It's the next step. So that imposter syndrome is just simply a sign that, number one, you're lacking the confidence, but also trying to remember too, you wouldn't be in that position to feel it if the door wasn't open for you to be there.
That's a great way to
Right?
put
Because
it.
people don't just fall into a role that they're going to feel like an imposter in. It's they were invited in some way, shape, or form. Somebody thought they were qualified to be there,
I love
right?
that.
And it's your own, and it comes back to the whole fear of failure thing, too. It's much easier to just fear that everybody else is looking at you and they're looking at all your flaws and this and that as an excuse to not take action and show people what you really got. Where truth is, if you just sit in it and you understand, okay, well, why do I feel this way? Again, back to that clarity thing. But why do I feel like an imposter? In what ways do I feel like I'm different? How do I feel that I'm being picked apart? And is this based in reality? Those questions can really be helpful in reframing.
Wow. Honestly, that's excellent. I've never thought about it that way. And I'm a person who, anytime I have a negative emotion, I'll address it. I'll figure out why I have it, but then I'll take action. I'm a very action driven person,
Yep.
and it almost kind of solves itself a lot of the time. Sometimes I do have to think about it and journal about it to come to the root of it. But I never thought about imposter syndrome as you say it, right? And like you said, we're always going through transitions to our next levels. And I love how you explain it. So thank you for that.
And everybody experiences
Yeah.
it. I was talking to my husband about it. He very recently got a promotion and he's been going through it. It's no different, like, all walks of life
Yeah.
experience it in some way, shape, or form. But really, it means that you leveled up.
And I honestly love that you said everybody does it, because sometimes something about our human beings is reassuring when we're not alone, right? When everybody else is
Right.
going through it. So it's really nice to talk about it. I think that was the missing link in the past. A lot of people didn't talk about it. They thought it would discount them if they said, oh, don't feel like I am worthy of this position, right? Or this role. But once everybody starts kind of voicing that, hey, I've gone through it, it just makes it okay too. So thank you for addressing that.
Well, and I think another thing to kind of add to that's important, because a lot of things we're talking about is based in like fear, right?
I see, yeah.
Preventing action because of some kind of fear. And fear in itself is not a bad thing. Fear was designed like years ago when, it was a physiological response to keeping you alive, right? The only problem now is nowadays we're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers or whatever. So we really need to identify like, okay, well, like what about this fear? Like the fear is here to keep me safe, but is this like a valid reason to be afraid? 9 times out of 10, you're still going to be alive. You're still going to have a roof over your head. You're still going to be able to eat something. Like your needs are going to be met. So once you're able to kind of recognize that, it makes it much easier to kind of push past the fear.
Yeah, so in today's world, I guess we would look at it instead of fight or flight. When we have the fear, is flight is not really an option. If it's not a physical, risk to ourselves, then it's like, okay, what do I need to do to fight it?
Well, and that's like anxiety then. It just kind of keeps in, and then it's kind of internalized instead of externalized.
Oh.
So yeah, terrific point.
Awesome. Now, at this point of the interview, I really like to get to know my guests. So some fun questions for you. Is there something that most people don't know about you that you can share?
Yes. Some people know, not a lot. But at one point in time, I used to be a professional cellist.
Oh.
And I played electric cello in a punk band.
Oh, really cool. So different.
Yeah.
Do you still play for fun here and there?
I wish that I did. I still have my cello, but I have 4 kids now. It's just finding the time.
Oh my
I'm kind of secretly
How
hoping
old are your kids?
They range in age from 3 to 12.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
Toddlers
so I'm
and
hoping one of them
teenagers.
picks the cello. Yeah, we have everything in between. Yeah.
I'm sure it keeps you on your toes and keeps you extra alert.
Controlled chaos. Yes, that's the best way I could describe it.
The next question is, if you can change one thing in the world with a magic wand, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Honestly, it would be more openness within corporate workspaces to have more flexibility to allow for different types of roles that people are filling in today's world.
Oh, honestly, yeah, I never thought about that, but that's what changed a lot.
Yes,
Changed a
even
lot.
since the pandemic, I mean, so much has changed, yet there are like holding on to this rigid corporate structure that was
Mm.
created in like the 50s.
Yeah, and it's
And
not
the world
working.
doesn't look like that at all anymore. And it's causing so much stress and anxiety, not just, I mean, I speak mostly for working women, but for men as well, because more men nowadays are stepping up as parents, as caregivers, as equal partners,
Yeah.
and that load is shared, and it's a lot.
It would be nice to have that option because honestly, part of my main reason is to venture out on my own was to have that flexibility because I love kids. I always wanted 4 kids. I currently have 3. So I knew I always wanted that flexibility. So I knew this was the only way I could get it. But entrepreneurship is not for everybody. So if the corporate
No.
world can have those like better options for everybody, I mean, honestly, it would be such a happier world. So somebody needs to listen to this and do something about it.
Yep.
Awesome,
That
awesome.
and actually look at the data from the pandemic, and how performance went up and everything else, allowing more remote work and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But
And
yeah.
I mean, outside of America, honestly, the work-life balance culture is way better. And that's a whole
Yes.
other subject we can talk about, but we're just gonna leave it at that.
Yep.
My next question to you is, as of today, what does a happy and balanced life look like to you? And did it differ from 10 years ago?
Oh, so different. So different. So looking at my life 10 years ago, it was, granted, I was happy in my career. I was happy in what I accomplished, but it was running me into the ground just with the time spent commuting and the time that my son is actually going to be 9. My son that was an infant, when I had left. So it's been almost 10 years. And, I mean, the most I ever got to see him was an hour a day
Wow.
tops. And that was really painful. I didn't have any time to take care of myself, to work out, to do the things to keep me healthy so that I didn't burn out. I didn't have time to have a social circle, or support people around me. So a lot of the things that we're talking about were all things I really struggled with 10 years ago. And today my balance is completely flipped. Granted, I went the same route that you did. I decided to leave the workforce
Mm-hmm.
to do my own thing. Granted, I had that background, so it made more sense for me to do something like that than go into another job. But I mean, my life is so much different now in that my work is around my kids' schedule instead of the other way around.
I love
And there's
that.
so much flexibility. I mean, we all, wake up in the morning together, we get ready to go once the kids are on the bus, dad and me, we're working, doing what we need to do, and we can, be home for 3 o'clock bus drop off, and continue to work a little more if we want to. It's definitely more flexible, and I don't lack anything,
And it doesn't
that I want.
necessarily mean your productivity or how much you work is less, right?
Oh, that is such a great point because truth is, and I've done so much research on this, your brain really only has max capacity for 4 hours of deep work a day.
Yeah.
So it's
And
like
it's that
anything over and above
80/20
that is
rule.
kind of
Yeah.
busy work anyway. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. That's what I found too. And honestly, for a very long time, that's what I would fight in my corporate job for them to allow like different type of employee like flexibility. But anyways, let's go on to my next fun question for you. So if somebody was to follow you around for a day, so we talked a little bit about some things you like to do, like the daily check-in, the spending time with the kids in the morning, but what's their typical day look like? Of course it's going to vary as an entrepreneur, but what if somebody was to follow you around for a day, what can they expect to see?
Sure. So a standard day for me, and granted, it varies. It does vary quite a bit because I work as a speaker. So sometimes I'm traveling, sometimes I'm not. But I'll give you an example if I'm doing a virtual gig, which I do a lot of. So I mean, a typical day for me is I wake up very first thing in the morning. My sacred time is that like first hour where my husband has agreed he's on kid duty. I make sure I work out, I journal, I get ready for the day, I meditate, all the things that fill my cup and help me with my conditioning, right? That's like first and foremost. Then from there, we're kind of tag teaming, getting the kids ready for school, doing breakfast, this and that. Kids are on the bus, dropped off. And then from there, I work out of my home studio office here, and I'll work on administrative stuff. If I have a gig that day, I'm usually practicing a little bit for the gig first. It's great because I book a lot of gigs when my kids are in school, which is amazing, like lunchtime things. So I'll be working same as I would anywhere else, just out of my home. And usually my day wraps up at about 2:30, 3 o'clock. I go pick my one daughter up from preschool. The other kids are home from the bus at around 3. And that's usually when I'm taking care of any kind of like household stuff, like folding laundry, all the boring stuff that no one ever wants to do. But it's good because I try to multitask while my kids are doing homework.
Yeah.
And we really focus a lot as a family to spend time together as a family. So usually by the time my husband gets home, we do dinner all together. My kids actually like to help me cook.
I love
love to cook.
It's actually so good for their soul. There was a recent book I read, and that was one key thing that we don't do today is actually cook with our kids compared to what they did 100 years ago, and people were happier. So I'm so happy that you're able to do that with your kids.
Oh, and they love it too. It's they look, Mom, can I cook with you tonight? And some nights the recipe's complicated, and I'm like, no, I don't want to be given direction again. I've been given direction all day at work. Like, no.
Yeah, you need a lot of patience for it, but it's great for everybody.
Yeah, but I mean that works out great. And sometimes, I mean, right now we're in the middle of sports hell because it's spring. So we've got 4 kids in 2 different school districts. Who's on like what baseball field, track, this, that. So it's balancing that out. But truth is, everything else, like I fit around the kids' schedule, which is great. And I mean, we're kind of boring. Once the kids are in bed, we watch TV, read a book, go to bed, do it all over the next day.
Yeah, and that's what fulfills you, you know, that's how you want it, which is excellent that you are able to, schedule your life that way.
Yep.
Now we are running short on time, but before I let you go, the last question I like to ask, if you can do it all over again, was there something that you would do differently? And your last words of encouragement.
Perfect. I love this question and I get it often. And the truth is, I wouldn't change anything. Because had I not gone through everything I did, I literally would not be the person I am today. My husband and I, no, and I'm being serious about this too, because my husband and I talk about this a lot. I did get remarried. I went from being a single mom of 1 to a married mom of 4 in a year during the pandemic.
Wow.
It was so crazy. But with that said, because of everything that I went through with the suicide loss and the divorce and the abuse and everything, what that put me through made me the person that my husband fell in love with.
Yeah.
Like, because I had fixed all those things about myself that I needed to learn. So truth is, I wouldn't change a thing, as painful as it was, as difficult as it was. And if I'm leaving, anything for people to consider, after this conversation, like one takeaway that I would want them to have is to know that lack of action is a choice, right? It doesn't matter how difficult things are. If you want the situation to be different, the change starts with you.
Wow, yes, very powerful and very true. Thank you so much again, Corrie. Can you please tell our listeners where they can find you, where can they connect with you? And of course, we will also link everything below so we can all connect.
Perfect, sure. You can find me, my website is www.corrielo.com, CORRIELO. And you can find me on every social media platform. I'm on all the big ones, and the handle's the same. It's I am Corrie Lo.
Beautiful. Thank you again so much for your time and for all your wisdom. And until next time, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Bye. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review this podcast. Follow and engage with us on social media under the Yegi Project. And if you're interested in being a guest, email info@theyegiproject.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.